Hey everyone, welcome to the April 29th, 2025 SIG Node meeting. First up, we have Itabar.
So hi, hello everyone. So I'm Itamar. I'm working on the node swap feature for your releases now, and I'm putting a lot of work into it. I would like to continue working on it, and I know that it's important for a lot of parties. But I feel kind of blocked recently on the lack of a clear scope for the feature and not having like a clear path forward that's committed by the community. And yeah, I would love to spend a lot of time and effort on this, but I have to know that there's a concrete path forward that we all can agree on. So I've basically made this table. Um, do you want me to share the screen, Peter?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Alrighty, I hope you can see it now. So basically what I did is I tried to list all of the concerns that I know that people have with swap. Maybe there are others. And what is the current state? If I suggest to include it in the current cap or defer it to a follow-up cap, and the alternative solutions to the concerns. And another thing that I want to remind is that we actually merged into the cap that the scope of this is to be a basic swap enablement, which means it will not suit all use cases. And I think that's a good thing because it will allow us to GA something that is basic, but open the door for follow-up caps and for incremental changes in the future. Yeah, so I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I personally agree to keep the scope smaller, but I do often heard other. Yeah, AJ, please go ahead.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Itama, for doing all this great work towards swap. I just have like a quick question. You mentioned APIs for swap to be a deferred decision. I think that like it's okay to like when swap is, in my opinion, it's okay to like go with swap with its current mode, but we should have like a clear direction on the API. The reason being, if we GA this and we anticipate a new API is coming for swap, we need to have like direction on like how it will look like, whether it will replace the current mode. Do you see it as like coexisting, or otherwise we should also look into the migration plans, right? That's, I think, that is like the main pain point with like, for example, adding resource into the swap as a resource into the node spec and many other directions. Like, how will it look like when later APIs comes in? I think like it could have been nicer if API was originally in the plan, but since it is not there, like when you say like something else comes up in the future, what do you mean?
Yeah, so what you're saying totally makes sense to me. So the thing is that with Swap API is one of the hardest issues here because we have so many use cases, and I won't go into all of the details now, but I think it's one of the hardest points to agree on. That's why it wasn't part of the plan, and it was very hard to design from in advance. What I suggest to do here is open a follow-up cap right now. I can do that, and maybe we can start reviewing it, and maybe we'll see where it will take us. But the thing is that I don't really have all the answers because there are many things to consider with Swap API. Do you think that's a reasonable path forward to open a follow-up gap and then say like we're discussing it, that's part of the plan, and maybe it will help us move forward?
I think like API would be a right direction, but I would want to get the community's like feedback on that. Like my point being, like a single feature split into two caps. How will it like when this goes to GA and then like we have an alpha, like how does it work together? I'm not like very familiar on if there has been in the past like feature split into two different gaps that need to have like a common behavior in the future, how that will go. Maybe some precedents could help here if that's a good idea, or whether we should plan this right away, make a decision whether this is just make a decision whether this goes in or not would be okay or safe choice to do. The point being, we made many betas. I think that like API could have been included, but now we are here. I don't have like a restriction on like this going in its shape, to be clear, but it still have like usability limitations, right? Uh, I think that like defining API at least we must do. I think that's where I am. But I would like to get others' opinions on that, whether there is any practicality or logistics hold on that.
I'm trying to understand, is the question how we can resolve this API, like feature of API, and whether it will be separate cap or something, or who should be deciding that? Like, I think we need to have a proposal, like how this will transform, and if it will transform, and if it will transform, need to understand what the future will be. In what form, I don't really care that much. Maybe it's a separate cap, maybe it's part of the same cap, or maybe it's external document. So technicality is not that important for me, but I think we need to solve this, right?
I'd like to add just a few more points relating to that. Assuming that like API comes in the future, then that would mean that like certain aspects of Swap will be dropped out. For example, like API related controls, like a scheduling control, maybe treating it as a first class resource. That cannot be possible, but that likely come in the future with the next gap. And the second one is that like better visibility into the resource, that is a side effect, like having it as allocatable capacity, just right on the node object. And the other one is we had like previous discussions on having swap as a how it is calculated, whether it is like pod driven. So this is like significant behavior change. So when we introduce it as a new mode or replace existing mode, this behavior change on a feature itself, is it safe to assume it's okay to split it into two cup? For example, like my concerns are on backward compatibility concerns that may come later. That's what I'm concerned about. Like two different caps with different behaviors landing as a single feature. At least we should take a call on this will not be possible. For example, swap should not be seen or treated by the scheduler as a prerequisite. This decision has to be made now. This has to be aligned. And other one is on the pod driven. At least if you see that like, okay, pod driven disabling on swap behavior has to be present, then I think that like that should also be decided and possibly could be included on this current mode. That's where I stand. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, at least from my point of view, this is not a backward compatibility issue, because we can say like there are different swap behaviors. The first one that we introduce is limited swap. It is very basic. You don't have control over anything. Everything is automatic, and that's fine. Afterwards, we'll make another swap behavior, which could be more advanced and have more APIs and more control. And this will just expand the feature with more modes. I don't see like, I mean, when you say migration path, I don't see it this way, because people can just use the newer mode if they want to.
How do you see when multiple, like, I mean, different nodes, the different modes coexisting in a cluster would look like? That is the case.
I guess we can say that that's a limitation, like that. You know, if you that limited swap is very basic, it's very limited. We can say like when we present new modes, I guess we will recommend people not to mix it with others if you want more advanced stuff. But like, I mean, causing the scheduler to be aware of swap, causing the eviction manager to be better. All of those. I mean, I see them some of these are essential, but not all of them. Like, for example, including the scheduler in all of this, I certainly see it like as an incremental change in the future. And yeah, I mean, we very boldly say that this is like the first step, and so people when they'll use it, it's fine to say like, yeah, there will be newer modes, and you would need to, but you won't need to. You can migrate to them if you want to under certain limitations.
I think then, as Saki also pointed out, we need to clearly define this on when we say like migration, we need to have this in a kept to start this discussion and what is possible and what not possible, rather than like having it as discussions captured on like docs and notes that I think would have this like a more clear direction for current swap to GA, as what do we see as the follow-up rather than having just notes. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good. And to be honest, like I want to hear your opinions of this, because this is a complex topics, and I don't have all the answers. I'm not sure how the API will look like. There are a lot of things to consider. So what I can do is start a follow-up cap, list a lot of different alternatives and things that we need to consider. Then we can start, discussing it. But it will be great to agree that this will not block GA for this feature. And yeah, and in general, I would like appreciate reviewing this table and sharing your thoughts.
Thanks. I'll also look into this in detail for the talk and set up sometime if needed. Are there any other comments, or am I missing anything?
Sounds like we agree. Still continue finish the node level swap, right? And then enable of the more pod level of the isolation later. Any people still have the consent?
Cool. It sounds like we're in agreement on the next steps. Great. Thanks,
Cool.
Itamar,
Thank you very much
for presenting. And moving on to Philip and Ryan. Do either of you need present?
Hi, I think we are okay without. So we have received pretty good feedback on the node lifecycle working group proposal, both in the CAP, or I mean the proposal, and in the SIG meetings. So we have tried to go all over the meetings of the stakeholders we have linked in the CAP. And yeah, we had a good feedback, and basically everybody wants to participate and sees a value in all of the issues / features we are proposing to have. So I understand like the goals are quite open-ended, so that's like one drawback. We will have to basically reconcile the goals of the group as we go, and so basically we Peter offered to participate on behalf of SIG Node, and we also have Krzysztof, who worked who was assigned to the graceful node shutdown feature. And we also have a couple of other folks, and I will also ping a few other, but we are pretty close to merging, I think, and so we will try to wrap this working group soon. And so one thing that came up is that the scope of the working group and the caps that have been worked on till now are mostly in the domain of SIG Node. So we would like to propose SIG Node to be as the main stakeholder of this working group. And this also concerns the two caps I did, which is the node maintenance and the eviction request API. These were originally brought up in SIG apps, where we discussed as a replacement of the eviction API and the pod disruption budgets and their value in the apps. So like in deployments, daemon sets, etc. To basically discuss the use cases there. But as far as the things progress, I think even the eviction request will probably evolve into like a basic pod lifecycle feature. So the eviction would not be only covering the eviction API, but I would like to also cover the other termination mechanisms. I think there is a good path for that. And so I will try to work on that and update the cap. So I would like to see what are your general thoughts on this?
So normally work group we propose, we don't want the work group to stay forever, right? Because it's just emerging hot topic, and then we start a work group. So we dedicate a group of the resource to look into those problem, have the holistic view, and work with. So do you think estimate, I didn't ask that, you just estimate how long we need this work group? But at the end, the topic still came to the SIG Node to review, agree, right? So review and approval. And top of my question, so okay, I favor about this work group because I've been, since last year, I keep mentioning that the node lifecycle need to be changed, revisit for this emerging workload, right? So, but I also worry about, node lifecycle have so many topics we want to, historically we have want to address, but we didn't address. And, or maybe we try to address, but didn't address well, like graceful shutdown, like until today, still people just still have the buggy, right? So not very useful. So I just want to, can we have I just don't want like a work group. It's just forever there, and then distract off the SIG Node, and because we need to have priority, right? So it still is the same group of the engineer here to review, approval, and do all those kind of the maintenance support. So that's why, can we just define the goal, because the goal is too big, and can we make the goal a little bit smaller? And also the define of the time, and also outcome. Can we have some like an outcome from that one? What kind of users issue we try to target at the first? We can revisit if we want to make that longer, but to give us some like the duration, how long, and also what's the top issue you are going to target, and what's the outcome you are going to deliver. And yeah.
Yeah, so these are hard questions. So I mean, like timing this is quite difficult, mostly because there are so many stakeholders and components that we would like to get feedback from. And I think like the features themselves, I do not expect them to be like overly like complicated or drawn like in time. So like if we can like agree on like basic concepts how the lifecycle should look like in the node and in the pod, then I think we could progress. I mean, like implementation wise, it shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, the difficult part is getting the consensus. And I even foresee like there will be follow-ups, people wanting more features and more use cases covered. But I think like eventually we could stop the group and tell them go to each SIG, for example, for scheduling. If you have some feature that's mainly focused on this area, we should be discussing SIG scheduling or Node. So, but it's hard to estimate. Like what the time is needed to reach the consensus.
There's the hands.
Yeah, I wonder if if we could have preliminary meetings before we agree on what like the charter of the working group to define the scope, because it sounds like we have this dependency problem where we want to meet to be able to figure out what the scope is, but we're struggling to, put together the working group without like getting agreement from the sponsoring SIG. So I wonder if maybe we should have some meetings just to like get some stakeholders in the room and be like, okay, what is it actually we're trying to solve? So we can, upon codifying that in the SIG's charter, we can say, okay, here's the objective, here's the end goal. Maybe that'll break this dependency cycle.
I agree with you. I think we need to figure out what kind of problem we solve. And once we have this work group, if we haven't figured out, then we will just create some problem for us to solve. That's a nightmare for everybody, right? So I do have tons of the node lifecycle problem. I hope people to solve, but I also don't. But if I put it in the priority, obviously I deprioritize some of those. But I do think there's the urgency, more and more urgency. We need to solve those node lifecycle problem. So, but I want to hear other stakeholder where they came from and what kind of problem they want to solve. And in this whole Kubernetes SIG Node and Kubernetes open source, not limited to SIG Node, and honestly, node lifecycle also impact many other others. So, do we agree those kind of things is the urgent things? Then we just identify those urgent. Is that okay? At least we agree what's the problem. Then we can have like an idea what is deliverable for the work group. And then we can prepare while, right? Collaborate while. So like then we can say, okay, what group, what kind of things you are going to expect the signal, participate and review and approve.
Yeah. So I'm not against like having the preliminary meetings. Other thing like we could also do is to start the working group and then come back again to the proposal and update that. And regarding the goals are written a bit generic, but behind each goal there is actually a real issue that can be linked. And so we have not written the goals like it's on purpose that they do not seem okay actionable, but actually there are real issues behind each of these and like a real path to actually solve them.
Yeah, I think prioritizing, narrowing down the scope, or making more concrete the goals is I think it's very easy to say in a hand wavy way we want to fix node lifecycle, but when that comes to actually triaging the work that we're going to be doing and like focusing in on actually getting stuff done, it'll be very tricky to actually like figure out what when we've succeeded. So it definitely makes sense for the state that the working group is in, but I don't think we should codify anything until we know actually what we're aiming for. Which is why I think like it almost is like we need a working group to define the working group, which is a little too meta and weird, but like generally we need to be meeting and come up with like the set of things that we're actually going to be doing concretely. And anything else needs to be excluded because we need to like basically focus in on the actual pieces. And if other people have other use cases, they need to make their own working group, basically.
I do think about this is kind of, to some extent, this is a little bit prerequisite, right? If you really think about the DRA, like the device working group, we're already working on the engineer work on the DRA for some time. So they already understand what they want, and they have the clear goal that they found that work group. Same thing for the resource management work group in the past. Also, resource management is just lifetime, Kubernetes lifetime topic. But we do have the goal back then clearly to do something, right? So resource management work group actually being dismissed and reborn a couple times. Each time they have the new goal and the new target. So that's kind of the, so I do think about the next, because I noticed that there are many people participate stakeholder. Do we understand each one? What's their goal for this one? Upfront to figure out what's the top priority and agree upon by the sponsor SIGs actually make us later have like the different people drive in this whole work group in the different direction. Right? Maybe end up you folks don't agree with each other, have totally different priority, different agenda. And upfront figure out those kind of things, and then we can have more focus, right? And also SIG Node will based on also from the SIG network and SIG Node and the storage, all the other thing. And then we and even scheduler, so we can figure out what it is really needed to what's the real customer pain, top customer pain we need to address, and also what it is needed to support more workload, emerging new type of the workload. So that's kind of from high level. I want to take a look, and instead, at least we want to abstract, right? So this is the open source community. Like I personally have some of those kind of things, but when I really think about calm down, I think, oh, that's the GKE specific. I won't bring to the node lifecycle work group, right? So that's kind of things we need. This short process to figure out. Yeah, Philip.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. We can create the preliminary meeting to actually agree on the priorities. So I can schedule that, for example, for the next week somewhere. And like regarding the having some like real use cases and like path forward, I think like we are like this is like this group did not came out of the blue. So like the linked caps and documents we have there, there has been quite some work done in this area in the like either pod or node lifecycle, but other adjacent like topics that concerns, for example, the other SIGs. So like going through these, like we can actually pinpoint like real customer or user issues and actual real solutions that are proposed that are a path forward. So like that was like one of the main points why we decided to bring this working group, because we could not, like in each of these like efforts, we could not actually get to the like reconcile like to get a consensus how we should actually proceed, because each, like even though each thing focuses on a small area, it has impact on all the others. So that's actually why we are here. But yeah, it makes sense. We can create the meeting, and then we can use that as like maybe adding some priorities to the document that we decided on up front, even though they may change, and then we will like pursue the acceptance of this working group.
Great. Were there any other thoughts on this topic or follow up in the working group meeting?
One thing I wanted to mention is work group creation process typically takes a lot of time. If you I would suggest to start thinking about when people will be meeting and collect some preferences for time a little bit earlier. Otherwise, like you establish that and then you spend a lot of time on establishing meetings and other processes, and it will be a lot of waste. So some of the things may be done in parallel.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, if there's nothing else on that, we can move to Daniel, Ryan, and Caitlin on disruption probes proposal.
Hi. Yeah, so this topic is going into a similar direction as the one before, but more like on a special feature. So the main idea is that today it's really hard to tell the system that a application pod should not be disrupted. The only way is through pod disruption budgets in combination with the readiness probe. However, in some cases, we might want to not disrupt the workload, but still serve traffic. And this is what the issue is talking about, like this decoupling serving traffic from being disruptible within the whole PDB and eviction world. We've been to the SIG apps meeting yesterday because they are more caring about the feature itself. And the outcome was that it's something we should do eventually. And it's more about how to implement this. And this is why we are here today. So our main idea was to add another probe. So next to the readiness probe, there could be a disruption probe, which, if defined, is used by the disruption controller to update the PDB status. And if it's not defined, it will work exactly in the same way as before. Luckily, during this period of time now, when we are defining this, we have this new working group being created. So it's definitely something we want to bring there too. And we've discussed this with Philip yesterday already. However, we still want to get some feedback on the idea of having another probe and see if this is an option or not, and maybe why not. The reason why we wanted to add a new probe is that this would couple the failure domain of this probe being executed with the node health. Another option would be something similar to the readiness gates, where an external controller would add new conditions to pods. And in this case, we would always rely on this external controller to be up and running, especially in cases where something is going wrong, we can't fail closed, because if the external controller is not there anymore, nothing will set the disruption condition to false. So having this on the kubelet directly would give us the possibility to let this being decided within the pod. Yeah. What do you? I'm not sure if I should go more into details. But what do you think in general?
Have a hand. What do you see as a scenario? I quickly glanced through some scenarios, and it says about elastic being in some healthy unhealthy case. Do you see as a scenario when some database saying like this is my primary whatever, like shard, and like everything is non-primary, and not every non-primary has this disruption, okay, and like primary has disruption false all the time, or it's more of a signal based, like some signal needs to be sent to the application asking like, are you ready to be disrupted? And then like, in other words, I want to understand scenarios more. Like I see that many scenarios may need to be initiated by some external signal saying like, I'm about to disrupt one of them. Like now you need to decide what you're gonna do. Is it also covered here or it's completely out of scope?
So in the first idea, it would be out of scope. So to make it as easy to onboard as possible, having another probe that reacts in the same way as the current system, yeah, it would just make it easier to onboard. However, I'm not sure.
I guess my reaction is that it's something on top. Like the key use case that we're trying to meet here is that we don't want to scale up additional pods because of cost reasons for often stateful services, and often scaling up additional pods for stateful services doesn't make sense. But we are in a state where we don't want voluntary disruptions to occur. So we don't want the system to say, just because we're repacking or we want to scale this node down, we would prefer to not kill this node. And like there could definitely be restrictions on that. And like I think as soon as we start talking about that, we're getting into like the new node lifecycle territory, frankly. But I think the key thing is that we're it is like a cost related concern, and we've seen like examples of folks doing things to completely limit disruption, and so we're looking for like a mechanism within Kubernetes that could facilitate this. I say it's a cost concern because you could always just over provision and not need a feature like this, but like the reality is it's far too expensive.
Tim raised the hand for Tim.
I have a couple different questions. I think my first reaction to this is I don't have a good sense of how common of a use case this is or how niche. My kind of gut reaction is this feels like something that could be implemented out of tree and kind of like prove out the pattern and use cases for it out of tree, and then if it builds up enough enough of a user base from there, we could kind of consider options for pulling it back into tree. My other question is sort of whether a probe is the right model for this. Is it something that really needs to be continuously monitored, or would it make more sense to kind of have it be something that could be queried on demand by whatever is making the eviction or preemption decision? Or even is it something that would be better suited to some sort of push-based API?
It might be an option to put it out of tree. I'm not sure what this would mean in cost in terms of complexity, but the result might be the same. Regarding the on-demand request, this might be an option too. We haven't considered it yet, mostly because, I mean, to be fair, this is how we are building around the system today. So instead of using the actual eviction API, we let the people that need something like this run their own controller. And whenever our system wants to do an eviction, it will call the controller and it should react in the same way. And with this, they have the control about what should happen and what not. So in theory, this would make sense, yes. I'm not sure about the implementation on the other side. With another probe, it would be behaving in the same way as the others. It would just differentiate the readiness probe with the new one, and that's mostly it. So from terms of complexity and onboarding, probes look easier to do. But besides this, the result would be the same if you on demand ask for if it's disruptible or not, or if we constantly try and see.
Yuju.
I'm trying to understand the use case a little bit more. So I guess the signal really is per pod or is on a workload level? Like is every pod has this information intrinsically knowing that this is not the time to scale up more, or this is actually a workload level decision and shouldn't be surfaced at that level?
Yeah. It depends. I think in most I can't say most cases, but in the cases we know, every pod knows the status of the cluster, like if you're having a quorum or not, or in the Elasticsearch example, if the cluster is healthy or not. But there might be other cases where you need a central place that can take this decision. And then it's a fair question if this probe is enough. However, the question is still if we need to cover all the cases right now, or if it can be a two-step thing, like in the same way as readiness probes are working. So we have the probes on the node, but sometimes you want to have some other checks from the outside, and therefore we have readiness gates. So I don't think that there is a one or the other choice, but maybe a two different things that we can combine to make it work for most of the use cases.
I see. Yeah, I was trying to understand, like, is actually every pod would have different signal, or in this case, it sounds like it's every pod is going to have the same signal. It's an aggregate of the cluster level healthiness as is for that application.
It might happen that that pods have different signals. For example, if your data is sharded with replication, you might not want to disrupt the pods that if you're losing one replication of a shard and you only have one left, then the other one shouldn't be disrupted. And if the new one comes up, so for example, we have an internal database where we want to serve traffic before we have synchronized all the data, which means that if the new pod comes up, it can receive traffic. So the readiness probe needs to be true, but it shouldn't be disrupted. So these two pods know the state and could, or at least the other one could say that it shouldn't be disrupted.
I see. I think Philip has a hand.
Yeah, so as Daniel mentioned, we have discussed this yesterday, and I like one of the drawbacks I see is like currently it basically could prevent the disruption of the pod indefinitely, which could be which could be dangerous in some situations. For example, in the node drain, there is basically no like feedback mechanism between the pod and the entity wanting to disrupt. And like one of the alternatives is the eviction request API. I have kept for, and like one of the benefits of this probe approach, as far as I understood, was like not having the central controller. So like basically having each pod having the responsibility, which is also like double-edged sword. I understand like the responsibilities in each pod, but like most of the things in the cluster happen like in a concern more components. So, for example, when we know there are use cases that, for example, the scheduling, rescheduling, or auto-scaling would like to hook into these mechanisms, and also the node drain. So I'm having a hard time figuring out the extensibility of this approach to the future.
That makes sense. I think on the there's like the starvation issue where you can just say like, hey, I'm never disruptible. I think there are things that we can do as far as giving operators the control here for saying like how long you're allowed to do this for, or like limits that way. I guess I feel like that part of it is solvable. As far as playing nicely with the eviction API, I think that's definitely something we should like keep exploring. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's my thoughts there.
Okay, so I understand your leads, but the problem is how you prevent a risk condition. So you connect the node, the pod, individual pod is responsibility, right? So the pod also have to know in snapshot to have the cluster situation. So you are not to prevent very last one of those pods, right? So how you're going to two pod maybe not recognize themselves as the last one, or maybe both pod could be, right? So how you prevent this reconnect? Both pod could be think about their last one, or maybe they don't think of their last one. In this case, is how you. And another thing is earlier you mentioned that we don't want to evicted. You also don't want to preempted, right? Yeah. So shouldn't this problem solved by the? I know preemption priority not solve your problem because this is another dimension. Preemption can solve your problem, right? You earlier mentioned that we said, oh, this is never being evicted. If the certain things is never being evicted, then preemption priority, because our eviction logical in the node respect the preemption priority. Okay, just we are the aligned with. Of course, if you abusive the resource you ask for, then we punish you. But even that punish and those algorithms based on the preemption policy, the priority. So, but if you are just trying to say because today it is the pod disrupted budget, right? So not ensure because require of the other node, you have the abundant resource to come up the new node, new pods, and then drain this kind of things. You don't have that one. Shouldn't we fix that problem better? And because that have the whole picture, and then through this preemption priority, because preemption priority did not serve your goal today, but to make those kind of things and fix the scheduling, fix the pod, the disruptive budget is the better way. No, they love to do those kind of things, but we just don't have that global view. And even you think about this distributed, that's definitely have the complexity of other risk condition. That's the complexity part, right?
Yeah, I guess all of those complexities exist today with readiness as the function for quorum counting, right?
Yeah. So we solve that problem for you. Even worse in these cases, because then we have to change of the Kubernetes upgrade story, right? And because upgrade, you need to drain the node. Then a lot of things we have to change, right? So because you basically, like Philip just earlier touched base on that one, you may end up that node level can be drained because the pod itself, think about that most important pod in the world. And then we run into that one. So that node level. So you end up to have the more operational complexity. And also cause the more debug. Operational complexity basically is just like the customer support and the debuggability complexity. That's kind of my concern here.
Yeah. Do you think it's solvable perhaps with configuration? So like you can say like you're allowed to claim yourself as not disruptible for a time period.
But who should agree on this one? The problem is, who should agree on this for the node upgrade, right? So shouldn't the termination grace period to try to already solve this problem? And if maybe we didn't work very well between each other, we could work together instead introduce another one. We could just change. Please correct me, Manu. Are you here, or maybe like the Peter? We do have a bug once a while because Kubernetes didn't respect the grace termination period very well, right? Is that we fix that problem, or because the semantic people already rely on that feature, the wrong do feature, buggy feature, and we couldn't change that one? I forgot the details on that one. But I do think about you basically ask for, we respect the graceful period. And make that decision. The problem is in initial graceful termination period, people set off the 24-hour because it's user side. Nobody validate. So then they set really long. How long you are going to, who is going to get that? So the end up is become to class level. Admin is just one pod. Could be your user, like one pod owner. They configure those kind of things and create of the complexity issues to another role persona, which is the platform cluster admin.
Yeah, we have the problem of like users not being able to drain their pods like very well. Like we have this problem like very, very badly. Like we have to like hound our users to like cycle nodes basically. So like we're very familiar with that problem. I don't know, Daniel, do you think that like, what are your thoughts on having configuration, like I was mentioning, to say like, okay, you can only claim to be not disruptible for a time period? Like what is the difference practically between that and the termination grace period that we have today? I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right?
We can think about how to achieve that goal. Yeah. But who to do this management? That's kind of the coordinate, because it's not just like that node say, okay, you don't evict this for this period of time. There's a must be something you have to work around to have another instance on the other node, other place. Then you can, within that allowed period of time, you can release this pod, right? Release this node.
Yes. I mean, we are coming in this case from a stateful world. So it's always a trade-off between like the complexity for the cluster admin and the business running on the cluster. So if we are thinking about a stateful workload, I think that in worst case, they should just continue running. Because otherwise, depending on the workload, they might use local data on the node and they tell us, hey, we can't go away right now because we don't have replication. And if we still do actions like delete or something like this, we might cause issues for our company. And this is why we said in our cap that we wanted to do like disruptions in a way that don't cause incidents, which means that in worst case, we might have some bad actors on the cluster that need manual interaction. And this is what we are facing today as well with some other PDBs. Like if you want to prevent it, you can also configure your PDB wrongly. You can maybe do some other things with readiness probes. You can do whatever you need to do. Regarding the termination grace period, I think this is one step too far. If let's say we have a problem in the cluster and we can't get new nodes, and we are evicting a pod with a high termination grace period, it might happen that we can spin up a new one in the meantime and sync all the data before. But in worst case, there will be no new pod. So the termination grace period will be over and the pod will be deleted. And our thing will be one step before. So instead of doing the actual eviction, we will ask the pod more or less if it's okay to evict it or not. And if it's not okay, we will not do anything, and it can run as it should run.
Ryan.
I can see like the appeal with this design. I guess like the thing I have a hard time with is has been brought up already is like the potential operational complexity that going this direction can lead to. And I think like trying to wrap my head around the problem space, and I think like a lot of what the problem space we're talking about is it's around drain and eviction, like the complexity that comes around drain and eviction, and sort of like the push and pull between the admins and Kubernetes, like what the community can support. And I think a lot of I think one of the things at least today, like when we look at this, is like this takes a lot of this goes towards the path of like it's like a nice scalpel that we can support something and maybe puts a little bit more operational on the operational side. But I think there's also like the other side of this is we have this eviction and drain work that we've talked about, and I think probably a lot of people would agree that there's improvements that could be made there, and I think that would be interesting, kind of when thinking about the context we're trying to solve, is that instead of looking at it a different way, is that if we talk about this in terms of drain, we could say to the application like, hey, the admin would like you to leave, and you have this amount of time, right? And that's similar approach to what this is saying. It's sort of, it's a instead of the pod advertising this and putting the onus on the pod and allowing it to block, we're sort of assuming that these pods will all eventually expire at some point, but we just give them a chance to leave on their own. So a slightly different way of looking at it, and it's something we've talked about a little bit, kind of as an idea, but it's a little bit different in terms of the perspective that now when we look at it that way, we're empowering the admin to give them the tools to command what would happen, and we would remove that case where like where we could block on something, right?
So it definitely makes sense what you said, and it might help or it would help in some of our cases. However, what I'm struggling with a little bit is that we will push all the logic and everything that needs to be done to the user side. So with our approach right now, the user indicates us if it's okay to do something or not, and the rest can be done by the cluster operator, by our automation, and so on. Whereas if we have a push-based approach that will tell the application owners to get rid of a pod, they have to implement something and they have to run it somewhere, they have to maintain it, make sure it works, and so on. So it pushes a lot of this complexity we are talking about from the cluster operator to someone else, just because we don't want to have the starvation issue.
Yeah, but I would argue though that the application would have to solve this anyway. Like I mean, if you wanted to support drain at all of your application, you will need to write some sort of workflow for it. I mean, it's something that I would say that it's something we would want to support it always.
I think I'm not sure about that.
Definitely, it's true for some applications are going to need to do something specially, but like I guess it seems like the way that it is now with like pod disruption budgets, I think a nice property of it is all you have to do is declare your state, and then Kubernetes itself will decide whether or not this eviction is safe effectively. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a different perspective on that is that maybe I'd make the argument that application, like on the pod disruption budget side, it's sort of a way for you to protect the high availability of your application. I think that's like a really good use case for it. But then where it leaves us that point, leaves us that gap, like, well, how could we ever move this thing? Like it sort of like the design emphasizes protection, but like what are one of the gaps today that we're missing, especially in stateful workloads, is the opposite side, which is like how do we emphasize you leaving, right? Like that's sort of the and that's what I think that's missing, is that this doesn't emphasize that side of things. So there's a way to emphasize protection today, but there's no way to sort of firmly communicate that you need to leave and then you need to act to leave.
Yeah, that's true. And to be honest, this is also not what we thought about while writing this issue. We don't want to solve all the problems we have with evictions today. It's more like how to make communication easier with what we have. And
I'm sorry, I was saying it makes sense, Daniel. I think from reading this, that was my impression. Like I think this is a really nice scalpel. It's an interesting way of looking at it. My suggestion is that I think perhaps like we can talk about this in the context of like the scalpel and the hammer, like the more like eviction. If we were to expand eviction to look at it kind of like the way you're looking at it, and would that help and possibly supersede this design? I think that's kind of what I'm saying, is like we can look at them together and I think pick between the two, like which of the ones would be more appealing to us.
So I admit your problem is a real problem. I understand your problem. I want to work with you folks to understand that more and see what's the constraint you have. Then we can have the solution. But that doesn't mean I can agree about the solution, because I do have a lot of problems with current proposed solution. But I do agree with problem statement, and let's just work together, solve that for you. And someone is beyond node, but we can work together to solve together. Yeah. We ran out of time. Philip, you still have the hands. If you don't, just
a sec. I just want to mention to bring up the PDBs again. I understand like they are easy to use today, but in general there are a lot of issues with PDBs, and it's not a great design. And like we see this topic brought up in the SIG apps quite a lot. So to me, like adding like a similar, so like not similar solution, but solution that also can block like is a PDB can that could like that will basically prevent us solving these problems in the future, like if we do not design that correctly from the ground up.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. Yeah, I agree with you. So sounds like we ran out of time, and let's continue this conversation. Node life cycle and the working group could take this as the one of those topic. Yeah.
We definitely.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, guys. Like we should continue the discussion. I mean, very interesting. Definitely something we're thinking about, and we should continue there.
Yeah. Thanks.
That's good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.